Thank you very much for the introduction, and to Susan and Katie for altering the schedule a bit. I'll explain to you why in a moment. Hermanas y hermanos, fratelli e sorelle, sœurs et frères, and now Clay Pell is not going to be blamed for my effort to imitate what he told me. Shongdi Jamai, which I think means brothers and sisters in some sort of Chinese, perhaps, maybe. Thanks to all of you for coming here this weekend and for all of your support and work with SYA over the years. It's an honor for me to be invited to speak here, but although I'm going to say some things that I've been asked to say on the program, I want to say that I really feel I'm here as a representative of what might be called Year One, the class of 1965. I'm not the only one here, and so I'm going to ask those who are with me here today to stand and remain standing until I call all your names. So Jeff Eastman, Mark Pestronk, Bill Sykes, Bruce Yarrick, and there's one more guy here who seems to have changed his name over the years. We used to know him as Steve Foster, but he's now known as Casa Foster. Thanks, guys. And Dave Golden was with us last night, and when we had our own little 50th reunion in Spain back in April, we were in Barcelona and Zaragoza. We were joined then also by Dave Burrs and Mike Sheehan and Scott Landa. And I'm told by Katie that our class managed to, are they up? Oh, I'm supposed to do something? We were joined by some of our fellow classmates then. You can guess. No, don't even try. And I'm told by Katie that are we the first class to achieve 100% financial contributions? Isn't that something? And I don't want to boast, but you saw that figure of 1,467,748. The 48 is mine. It was very different in that first year. And I'm sure it was different also for those of you who were there in the first years, not just year one, but 2, 3, 4, et cetera. There was no email. There was no internet. There was no Skype. There were no cell phones. You couldn't even call home from a landline. Communication meant using onion skin, airmail, blue, fold-over envelopes and writing up and down the sides. And while I was there, and I think the same was true of my classmates, I was able to speak with my parents once during the year. They trooped us all down to Teléfonos in the Plaza España or Catalunya, the Plaza Catalunya in Barcelona. And we had to wait in little wooden booths for about a half an hour while they tried to get a transatlantic connection by way of the cable. It was a very different experience then, and so when you see these guys stand up, you know what hardships they have endured, having to be away from their parents for all that time. In my case, and I think Mimi said this as well, I wouldn't be doing today what I'm doing and what I've been doing now for decades, I think, if it hadn't been for the year in SYA. I'm not the only one for whom SYA, I think, became a stimulus for a career in international human rights work. Is Susan Benish here? Susan, are you here? There she is. Stand up, Susan. Susan is also working in human rights at Harvard and American University. I was sitting in my 10th grade Spanish class with Mr. Harris at Andover one day in 1963 or 4, I guess. And Mr. Harris said, "Who would like to go to Spain next year?" And my hand was up before he could finish his sentence because I'd never been outside the United States. I'd never even been outside the East Coast. And it sounded exciting. At that time, as a kid from Richmond, Virginia, my view of the outside world was framed by something called Time magazine. And Time magazine had taught me that Generalissimo Francisco Franco was the outpost of the free world defending the Mediterranean Ocean from a Russian invasion. So that was the worldview that I had when I headed off on the Aurelia to Spain in 1964 with my classmates. For all of us, whether it's Spain, France, Italy, China, other programs that Woody devised, obviously the age of 16 is a time of self-discovery. We all know that, and time won't permit me to talk about what I learned about myself, or especially about my classmates who led much more interesting lives than I did. But so I do want to talk about what led me to work in the field of international human rights. Just a little background for those of you who don't know too much about Spain. From 1930 to 1936, Spain was a democratic republic, very left-leaning but elected republic. In 1936, General Francisco Franco rose up in a coup d'etat that took 3 years for a civil war to overthrow the republic. During that time, he allied with Hitler. Hitler bombed Guernica, and if any of you have not seen the famous painting by Pablo Picasso of Guernica, it's one of the most moving works of art of the 20th century, currently in Madrid. After 1939, Francisco Franco remained the dictator of Spain until he died in 1975. And today, as most of you know, Spain is a vibrant, successful democracy. But back in 1964, when we went to Spain, to Barcelona, there were banners over the principal boulevards and avenues saying 25 años de paz, 25 years of peace. In fact, it had been 25 years of repression, and in the earlier years, a murderous repression, including the loss of the poet whom we heard about in this morning's Spain class, Federico García Lorca, who was assassinated by the Franquistas during the Civil War. In those days, in Barcelona, no Catalan was officially spoken. And so the person who was, for me, the most inspirational teacher of my life, namely Ángel Vilalta, in those days, we knew him as Ángel Vilalta. He was required, for public purposes at least, and to be on the safe side, to pronounce his name in Spanish rather than in the Catalan Ángel Vilalta, which he now proudly calls himself today. During those years, I had two very important instructors in the beginnings of my understanding of international human rights. One of them was Francisco Franco, perdóneme. And I apologize to my classmates because they've heard this ad nauseum before. But I first got some inkling of what Spain was like when in the fall of 1964, Spanish students were just beginning to take to the streets. They were just beginning to show signs of the student movement. It wasn't like France in 1968, overthrow capitalism or anything like that. It was better conditions in the university, better food, lower tuition, the kind of things that are really priorities for students. And so they had a demonstration in front of the main university building on the Gran Via in Barcelona, and I, being a completely naive, innocent 16-year-old, thought, well, that sounds interesting to watch. So I went down to observe the student demonstration. And I was wearing then, as I am now, khaki pants and a short haircut. Dead giveaway if you want to know what nationality this kid is. So the Guardia Civil shows up on horseback, orders the demonstration to disperse. The demonstration doesn't disperse, and so they charged us, whacking everybody with batons, capturing everybody they could capture. I managed to dive under one of those chain fronts of a store as it was being lowered, and I waited until the cavalry and all the students had run away, and I came out. I thought the coast was clear, and I felt clamp on my shoulder. And I turned around, a very nicely dressed gentleman in a tweed jacket with a police ID invited me to spend some hours with him that afternoon in police headquarters, which I did. And after a while, the American consul came and got me out. I can't remember whether Clark Vaughn might have come as well, but the consul came and got me out. I was upstairs being treated very nicely because I was the kid with the khaki pants, the short haircut, and the American nationality. I could hear how the Spanish kids were being treated downstairs. and it was not the way I was being treated. A couple of months later, it was Christmas time. And as any of you who have been to Spain know, or to Barcelona at least, the facade of the cathedral is a maravilla at Christmas time. It's all decorated, it's famous, it attracts tourists from other countries. So I thought I'd go down to see the facade of the cathedral. And I was admiring this beautiful facade of a medieval cathedral, not noticing that in front of the cathedral in the plaza there was a workers' demonstration going on by health workers who were protesting whatever health workers protest. And as I'm standing there watching the fachada clamp, I turn around. It's my same good friend from the police headquarters. Back to the police station, more hours of being interrogated. I was accused of being the outside instigator who had put Spanish students up to this uprising. Because, of course, Spanish students would never do such a thing. Again, the consul comes down. Again, I don't remember whether Clark was there or Dan or somebody. This time they said, one more time, agent provocateur, and you're out of here. And my political sensibilities were so developed that the main thing I thought about was, how am I ever going to explain to my parents that I got kicked out of Spain without even finishing the first semester? So I learned an awful lot, and I think you can sort of intuit a fair amount about what human rights mean to me and to the human rights movement, just from those little experiences for a privileged sort of Teflon kid because I was an American citizen in an American client state in those days. The other teacher, and I'll be brief because I think he's getting an award, a well-deserved award later, is our beloved Angel Vilalta, who aside from educating us all in the classroom about the realities of Spain, also took me to what were then clandestine meetings in basement. This has probably never been told before, and Angel would be fired if people knew about it. So don't tell anybody that I've revealed this secret about Angel. But he used to take me to secret political meetings in basements where everybody spoke Catalan, which was okay with me because I learned it from my family. So that's how I got into the international human rights business. I spend full-time teaching, litigating, advocating, practicing human rights. I won't go into all of it now, but just to give you an example, this month I was in Geneva for a week at a meeting of the United Nations to draft a treaty on business and human rights. That was followed by a meeting at the Vatican of Catholic social activists from all over the world working on issues of mining and the impact that mining has on indigenous and other communities. And in a moment, and this is the reason why I had to ask the indulgence of Katie and Susan to alter the schedule a little bit, I have to head out to the airport because I'm assisting in the Colombian peace negotiations, which are taking place in Havana, and I need to be there by tomorrow. So Woody, if you're thinking about coming back into SYA service and opening up a Cuba SYA, while I'm down there, I'll see if Fidel has any interest. So thank you all for allowing me to share a little bit about why I value SYA so much and why I hope all of you do as well. I think the deal is that we're supposed to have one or two questions, and then I'm going to scoot. Although there don't have to be any questions, but if anybody has a question or two, I'll be happy to try to field it. No questions. Thank you very much.